The story begins with an air of quiet unease, wrapped in the deceptive warmth of a forgotten little tea shop tucked away in the winding alleys of a mist-laden town. The sign above the door, its paint peeling with age, reads, Madame Wei's Tranquil Brew in faded gold letters. The moment Lena, a weary traveler with a habit of seeking out hidden places, steps inside, the scent of old wood and bergamot envelops her, along with something else, something faintly metallic, like rust or dried petals left too long in a book. The interior is a relic of another time. Shelves lined with delicate porcelain teapots, each one slightly cracked, their patterns worn but still beautiful. The walls are adorned with sepia-toned photographs of people who seem to stare just a little too intently, their eyes following visitors as they move. A grandfather clock ticks in the corner, though the hands never quite match the hour. The air hums with a quiet, discordant melody. No radio plays, yet the sound lingers, like a half-remembered lullaby. Lena runs her fingers along the edge of a teacup, and for a moment, she swears she hears a whisper. Not words, but a sigh. Something mournful. The shop should feel cozy, inviting, but there's an uncanny stillness, as if the room itself is holding its breath. The few other patrons sit motionless, their hands curled around their cups, their expressions distant, as though lost in thoughts or memories that aren't entirely their own. Behind the counter, Madame Wei watches Lena with a knowing smile, her dark eyes reflecting candlelight, like polished stones at the bottom of a well. Sit, rest, she says, her voice smooth as steeped tea leaves. The brew here has a way of revealing things. And just as Lena settles into her seat, the door creaks shut on its own, though no wind had stirred the air. The cobblestone streets glisten under the muted glow of gas lamps as Lena, a traveler with a worn leather journal tucked under her arm, pauses before a tea shop that wasn't there yesterday. Or perhaps it had always been there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right or wrong person to notice. The sign above the door swings gently, though the air is deathly still. Madame Wei's Tranquil Brew, it reads, the letters curling like smoke. The wood is dark, the varnish long since dulled by time, and the scent of bergamot and something older, damp earth, perhaps, or the faint copper tang of dried rose thorns, drifts through the half-open door. Inside the tea shop is a sepia photograph come to life. The walls are lined with shelves of mismatched teacups, each one bearing the faint stains of countless brews, their cracks repaired with gold in the ancient art of kintsugi. But the repairs seem less like decoration and more like restraints, as if the cups might shatter entirely if not bound by those gilded veins. The largest shelf holds a collection of teapots, their spouts angled like beaks, their handles curved like beckoning fingers. One in particular, a bone-white vessel painted with crimson peonies, seems to watch her. The patrons sit in silence. A man in a moth-eaten overcoat stares into his cup as though reading tea leaves, or perhaps being read by them. His lips move soundlessly, his eyes glassy. A woman in a lace-collared dress from another century sips methodically, her gloves stained with something dark at the fingertips. None of them look up as Lena enters, though the bell above the door doesn't chime. Madame Wei emerges from the back room, her footsteps silent on the creaking floorboards. She is both ageless and ancient, her silver hair coiled like a sleeping serpent, her jade bracelet clicking softly against the counter. "You've come far," she says, though Lena never mentioned her journey. "The tea will help you remember." Remember what? Lena doesn't ask. The question dissolves as steam rises from the cup placed before her, a brew the color of twilight, swirling with patterns that resemble faces for the briefest moment before fading. The first sip tastes of honey and ash. Outside, the gas lamps flicker. Inside, the shadows deepen. The grandfather clock in the corner strikes 13, and from the corner of her eye, Lena sees the woman in lace smile with too many teeth. The moment Lena sits at one of the tea shop's worn wooden tables, the air shifts, not in temperature, but in intention, as if the room itself has leaned in closer to listen. Madame Wei moves behind the counter with an unsettling grace, her footsteps silent despite the aged floorboards that had creaked under Lena's own weight. There is something deliberate about the way the old woman handles the teapot, her fingers tracing its cracks like a physician checking a pulse. Her voice, when she speaks, is neither warm nor cold. It simply is, like wind through dead grass. "You carry many questions," she observes, though Lena has not spoken a word. "But some answers are heavier than you know." The words hang between them, not quite a warning, not quite a welcome. Madame Wei's eyes are the color of tarnished silver, reflecting the candlelight in a way that makes them appear depthless. When she blinks, Lena swears she glimpses something shifting in those dark pupils, not a trick of the light, but something peering back. The old woman's jade bracelet clinks softly as she pours the tea, the liquid darker than it should be, swirling with tiny eddies that move against the pull of gravity. "This one is special," Madame Wei murmurs, sliding the cup across the table. "It remembers." And then, just for a second, the steam rising from the brew twists into the shape of a face, its mouth open in a silent scream. Lena jerks back, but Madame Wei doesn't react. The moment passes. The tea sits innocently in its cup, fragrant and steaming. The other patrons continue their silent communion with their drinks, oblivious, or perhaps accustomed, to the tea shop's tricks. But Lena notices now how their hands tremble ever so slightly, how their eyes never quite focus on the present. One man, his collar frayed and yellowed with age, lifts his cup to lips that are chapped and bleeding, though he doesn't seem to feel it. Madame Wei smiles then, and it's the most terrifying thing Lena has seen yet. Not because it's cruel, but because it's practiced, the expression of someone who has spent centuries perfecting the art of putting visitors at ease. "Drink," she urges, her voice velvet. The first sip is always the hardest. And though every instinct screams at Lena to run, something deeper, something older, compels her fingers to curl around the cup. The porcelain is unnaturally warm, almost alive. The first sip of tea floods Lena's mouth with the taste of forgotten things, rose water and damp soil, a whisper of funeral incense clinging to the back of her throat. She swallows, and the warmth that spreads through her is wrong, not comforting, hungry. Then the candle flickers. Not from any draft, the air in the tea shop is perfectly unnaturally still, but in protest, as though the flame itself has sensed the intrusion. The shadows stretch too long across the wall behind Madame Wei, and for the briefest moment they do not match the shape of the woman standing there. Lena sets down her cup with a trembling hand. The porcelain chimes softly against the table, and in that tiny resonance, she hears it. A sigh. Not from the patrons, not from Madame Wei, from the teapot on the shelf behind her. When she turns, the bone-white teapot with crimson peonies is weeping. Tiny droplets bead along its spout, rolling down the painted petals like tears or blood. The liquid pools on the shelf, then drips to the floor in perfect measured rhythm. Drip, drip, drip. Each drop strikes the wood with the precision of a clock's pendulum, though the grandfather clock in the corner has long since stopped. Then the woman appears. Not fully, not yet. just the suggestion of her, a distortion in the air near the back corner, like heat haze over summer pavement. But this haze has the curve of a shoulder, the suggestion of a long braid trailing down a back that isn't there. Lena's breath catches. The figure turns its head, too far, too smooth, and now there are eyes floating in that emptiness. Eyes that are somehow wet, gleaming with reflected candlelight, though no light touches that corner. Madame Wei's voice cuts through the vision like a knife through cobwebs. She likes you. The figure, Mei Ling, lifts a hand, not to wave, not to beckon, but to press, palm flat against the air, as if testing the barrier of an invisible pain. The moment her fingers make contact, the entire tea shop shudders. Every cup on every shelf rattles in unison. The liquid in Lena's teacup ripples, though she hasn't touched it. Then the screaming starts. Not from Mei Ling, not even a human sound. It's the teapots, a high, keening wail that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, rising from the very pores of the porcelain. The patrons don't react. The man with the bleeding lips takes another sip. The woman in lace hums along to a tune that doesn't exist. And Mei Ling? She smiles. It's the last thing Lena sees before the candle snuffs itself out, plunging the tea shop into a darkness that breathes. The second sip of tea is colder than the first. Lena barely registers the taste this time. Her vision is already darkening at the edges, the tea shop dissolving like ink in water. The last thing she sees is Madame Wei's face, her expression unreadable, as the world tilts violently sideways. Then, she is not herself anymore. She is Mei Ling. The memory unfolds in fragments, like pages torn from a diary and hastily reassembled. The tea shop is brighter here, newer, but the air still hums with something uneasy. Lanterns glow golden against the walls, casting long shadows that seem to twitch when unobserved. A younger, living Madame Wei moves behind the counter, her hands deft as she pours tea for a handsome man in a well-tailored suit. Liang. His name comes to Lena in a whisper that isn't hers. Mei Ling's pulse flutters in Lena's throat as she watches him. The love in this ghost's memory is so palpable it aches, a raw, tender thing. But beneath it coils something darker, suspicion, fear, the letters. They appear in flashes, slipped beneath the counter, folded too tightly, the paper crisp with urgency. Liang reading them with a frown that deepens with each line. The way his fingers clench just slightly when Mei Ling mentions the child, their child, then the betrayal. Not sudden, not dramatic. A slow poison. A teacup set before her night after night, the bitterness masked by honey. A hand too steady, eyes too watchful as she drinks. The cramps start first, then the blood. So much blood, seeping through her qipao like blooming peonies. Liang's face when she realizes, not remorse, relief. The memory fractures then, splintering into nightmare. Mei Ling on her knees, begging. The glint of the knife. The way the tea shop's shadows seem to lean in as the blade falls. The last thing she sees, Liang wiping his hands on a towel, already calling for Madame Wei to clean up this mess. And then, the awakening, not death, something worse. The tea shop walls pulse around her, breathing in time with her fading heartbeat. The porcelain on the shelves screams in a language only the dying can understand. And Madame Wei, oh God, Madame Wei, standing over her not with pity, but with a teacup in hand, murmuring, "Drink, child, it will help you stay." The brew isn't tea. It's the dregs of Mei Ling's own blood, swirling with the ashes of her unborn child. Lena wrenches back to the present with a gasp, her mouth filled with the iron tang of memory. The teacup before her is empty. Across the table, Madame Wei smiles. "Now you understand," she says softly. On the shelf, the bone-white teapot weeps fresh tears. The moment the clawed hand touches the countertop, the tea shop changes. The walls peel back like layers of rotting skin, revealing not plaster and wood, but something older, something alive. The floorboards split apart with a wet, tearing sound, oozing a dark sap that smells of funeral incense and spoiled milk. The air hums with a low guttural chanting, though no mouths move. Madame Wei steps forward from the shadows, or what's left of her. Her skin has sloughed away in patches, revealing glimpses of something glistening and black beneath, like wet ink given form. Her jade bracelet, now cracked and oozing the same viscous fluid as the teapots, hangs loosely from a wrist that bends too many times. When she speaks, her voice is no longer human. It is the sound of wind through a graveyard of hollow bones. "You wanted to know the truth," she says, and it isn't a question. The vision crashes over Lena like a wave of bile. She sees the tea shop's birth, not as a place of business, but as a trap. 100 years ago, a desperate woman, a younger Madame Wei, though her name was different then, made a bargain with something that lurked beneath the town. A spirit older than sorrow, older than time. It demanded a vessel, a place where the lost and the lonely could be collected. And so, the tea shop was built. Not from wood and nails, but from bones, the first sacrifice buried beneath the foundation, their ribs forming the rafters, their teeth set into the doorframe like tiny wards. Every customer who ever drank here and felt that strange, lingering melancholy was being tasted. The ones whose grief ran deepest were invited to stay, forever. Mei Ling was not the first, she was merely the loudest. Lena understands now why the teapots weep. They are not vessels for tea, they are coffins, tiny prisons for the souls Madame Wei has fed to the thing beneath the floor. The patrons who sit in silence are not ghosts, they are lures, their hollow eyes and bleeding lips designed to make newcomers stay just a little longer, drink just a little deeper, until they too forget how to leave. Madame Wei's face splits into a smile that stretches far beyond human limits. "You see now, don't you?" she croons. "The tea was never just tea. It was an invitation. And you, my dear, have already accepted." She reaches out a hand, not to harm, but to welcome. Behind her, the thing in the shadows finally stirs, and it is hungry. Lena's body moves before her mind can catch up, a primal scream tearing from her throat as she lunges away from Madame Wei's outstretched hand. The tea shop reacts violently, the walls breathing inward as if to crush her. The floorboards twist underfoot, splintering into jagged teeth that snap at her ankles. She stumbles, her hand landing on the bone-white teapot, its surface now fever-hot and pulsing like a heart. The teapot shatters with a sound like a dying whale. A wave of thick black liquid erupts, not blood, but something older, something that burns through the floor like acid. The moment it touches the ground, the tea shop convulses. The lanterns explode in showers of emerald fire. The patrons, no longer pretending to be human, writhe in their seats, their bodies unraveling into smoke and screaming shadows. Madame Wei howls, her form distorting, her flesh splitting like overripe fruit as the thing beneath the tea shop writhes in protest. The door, sealed shut moments before, swings open with a groan. Cold night air rushes in, carrying the scent of rain and damp earth. Freedom. She runs until her lungs scream, until the cobblestones turn to pavement, until the tea shop is nothing but a bad dream shrinking in the distance. Dawn finds her curled in her own bed, her clothes damp with sweat. her fingers still smelling of bergamot and funeral incense. She tells herself it's over. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.